Hi everyone, I'm Sam Wilson Jr., and this is the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast, the music podcast on where I interview singers and musicians from genres of black music, gospel, jazz, blues, old school classic soul, old school hip hop, today's hip hop and R&B, Caribbean, Latin, Afrobeat, Afro-Latina, blue-eyed soul, disco, go-go, line dances, and the Lost 45s. So come with me as I take you on to a trip to the destination genre of black music right now on the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Legal Shield is a proud sponsor of the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Have you been involved in any types of accidents? Have you been a victim of identity theft? Have you been a victim of a computer fraud scam? Have you been in disputes with your tenants or landlords? If your loved one dies and they didn't write up a will for you or for your family, or you and your spouse are filing for divorce, or if you need help by opening up your small business, give Legal Shield a try. Visit their website at LegalShield.com and tell them you heard it here on the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Do it today. You'll be glad you did. Welcome to a bonus episode of the Black Soul Music Experience. I'm Sam Wilson Jr., and in case you may not know, September is Emergency Preparedness Month. And this lady that I'm about to introduce is my friend and colleague, my former CBS co-worker. She once worked in the traffic department for WCBS Newsradio 880, and I've been delivering packages to her back in the mid-90s. And I'm going to be asking her what she's doing today. So please help me welcome to the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast, ladies and gentlemen, my friend and colleague, my former CBS co-worker, Miss Angela Thompson. Hi, Angela. How are you?
Hi, Sam. It's so good to see you. And I like to add my forever friend. So
Yes.
yeah, it's been a good stretch for us at CBS. So thank you for having me today.
Yes. Welcome to my podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. So, since we are both former Viacom, CBS, Paramount employees, now Paramount Skydance Media. So everything has been changing. The world has been changing for years. Now, I didn't know that September was Emergency Preparedness Month. So you didn't hear it on CBS News or NBC News or ABC News or cable networks like CNN or MSNBC or CBS News 24/7. And you know you're not going to hear it on Fox News either. You probably may hear it on PBS or HBO where they have the America Undercover series. That's that news series that they do on serious topics that the major corporate media will not touch. And that's something that, many people are afraid of. So we as a minority, with African Americans and Latinos, we don't get that much information. Because I remember me growing up, we had Black News with Bill McCreary that was on Channel 5, now Fox 5, and NBC4 had Positively Black and Visiones, and Channel 9 had In the Black and Hispanic Horizons, and ABC7 had Like It Is and Tiempo, and Pix 11 had Black Conversations, aka Black Pride, and Puerto Rican New Yorker. And I remember PBS had two news programs. They had Tony Brown's Journal and South Africa Now. So those are some of the news and information that takes care of the Black and Latino community. So as I said, I didn't know there was an Emergency Preparedness Month. So only thing I do know that we're in a hurricane season that starts from June all the way up until the end of October.
Yes.
And I can remember last year in April, there was a minor earthquake. So I've been getting those Amber Alerts on my cell phone
Hmm.
that tells me that there's a minor earthquake in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So where I'm living at in the Baychester section here in the Bronx, I'm living in Eastchester Heights, known as Hillside Homes. And the bad news was my favorite spot, the iguana, got hit.
Oh,
Just a little itty itsy bitty tiny bit.
oh wow.
That's even there.
What type of
That's
did they have some damage, or like you said, tiny bit, but it sounds like there was a little bit of damage.
Yeah,
Were they
there
able
was
to
kind of little.
repair and recover?
Well, when I was there, like a couple of weeks later, back in May, they were going on some renovation.
Hmm.
But I know it wasn't going to be ready soon because that was my
Hmm.
spot for my birthday party. But I can
Hmm.
tell you that my late mom's house, that is on Harper Avenue, right off of Boston Road, Marola Place, and Connor Street, got hit.
Hmm.
So, mom bought that house back in September of 1985. It was a two-family house. We live on the first, top, and the middle floors. So on
Yeah.
top of the roof got damaged, and then the bedroom and the bathroom got damaged, and then downstairs and the living room and the
Hmm.
kitchen all got damaged. And then when you go downstairs, going to the backyard, it got damaged. So as far as
Yeah.
our tenant is concerned, we don't know if it been damaged or not. Because that's why if I said, I didn't know, and it's very important that our listeners and viewers should know and to get information, not misinformation and discommunication. So,
Absolutely. And like I said, everything that you just highlighted is very timely in terms of you mentioned a couple of key points that a lot of people still don't know about, National Preparedness Month, which is September of every year, and more so now over the last, I would say, maybe 10 years, there's been a really aggressive push to have more awareness around it. But still in our communities, not so much known. And just basic emergency preparing, right? You mentioned flooding and damage and all the money that comes from that in terms of trying to do repairs, being displaced possibly for a day, 2 days, several days, depending what's going on. And as you know, flooding has become even more prevalent for us over the last few years due to whatever people would like to call it, climate change or adaptations in weather. There's something happening out there with our patterns, and we're getting more and more flooding, more severe storms and hurricanes. So yeah, everything that you just highlighted it is so important, especially for our communities to learn even more about how to prepare for disaster, how to mitigate, and how to respond, right? And staying safe. So I'm really happy that we're talking about this in addition to so many other things that we'll be discussing tonight.
yes. Now, here on the Black Soul Music Experience podcast, not only are we going to entertain you, but we're also going to educate and to be informative. So that's why we wanted to do this episode and have my guest, my former CBS colleague, and we're going to talk about what she's doing now a little bit later on in the show. So let us start with our beginnings, shall we? Now, where were you born?
Right here in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a Brooklynite
Oh,
through and through, born and raised.
oh, okay. Well, I'm originally from the village of Harlem in New York City.
Hmm.
So I live in the Bronx, and I've been living in the Bronx for 55 years. And like I said, I'm originally from the village of Harlem. I was not born in the Bronx. And
Hmm.
my parents were divorced back in the summer of 1969. So it was just me and my late older sister and my late mom. We were moved to the Bronx because my late mother is originally from the state of Virginia,
Hmm.
representing Hampton and Norfolk and Newport News. And her mother's side of the family is from representing Hampton and Newport News. Her father's side represents Richmond and Charlottesville. And some of her relatives from Richmond have moved to D.C., which I go to every October. So
Hmm.
not only I visit my late father's relatives on both sides of the family, the Middletons and the Wilsons and the Colberts and Warwicks, but also my mom's father's side of the family, representing the Thomases and the Bowles families. So even though that when my late mother and her parents had moved to the Bronx, she gained two more siblings in the Bronx. So I've
Well,
been moved around the Bronx 50, I should say, lots of times.
wow.
I lived on
Well,
the west side of the Bronx, then I moved to the Parkchester section on the east side, then it was just me and mom moving back to Harlem. We lived in the projects for a while with her friends, and then we moved back to the Bronx at the end of 72, going into 1973. We lived in the Wakefield section, two family house on Bronxwood Avenue and East 226th Street. So I should say between Bronxwood and Barnes, right before
yeah.
you hit Westchester County. So just all two family homes and everything.
Okay, there we go. It looks like maybe some type of connectivity. Who knows?
Oh
Technology.
yeah. Yes, so you're not the only one.
Well, as you were
But
saying about moving around in the Bronx, it's really interesting because for me, it's very different. My whole life has been in Brooklyn, and my parents came to Brooklyn in their 20s and stayed, even though my father's from Madison, Georgia, and my mother was born in a whole other country in Belize. She just recently passed away, and the family home that we grew up in, 45 years in the same home, right, in Brooklyn. And even her whole career was in Brooklyn. So I like to say that even though I was born and raised in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, I live in Westchester now, but I will always be a Brooklynite. And my parents, by proxy, are Brooklynites as well.
okay. Well, first of all, my condolences goes out to you in the loss of your
Thank you for
mom.
that. Thank you.
Now, speaking of that, were your parents in the media industry or did they had 9 to 5 days?
Yeah, so my mom was an educator, and she taught in the Roman Catholic Diocese of New York private schools for her whole career, so almost 50 years. And then my father, uh, I would say it is media based because he was a photographer, but then he also worked on Park Avenue for many, many years for a small company called Color Unlimited, which dealt with the advertising agencies and doing color retouches and so forth for all of the big magazines at the time. So yeah, I would happen to say that my father, on my father's side for sure, there's definitely that media component to it, print media.
Okay. Now, which high school did you go to?
So I went to Nazareth Regional High School in Brooklyn, New York. Go Kingsmen. And the school is still in existence today. And it's really interesting to see all the changes over the years. But every time I pass by, I always remember all of my fond memories of going to high school at Nazareth Regional High School.
And which college did you go to?
So once I left Nazareth, I went on to Fordham University, and I went to the Rose Hill campus in the Bronx. And interestingly enough, I had the opportunity to actually dorm all 4 years. Even though I was local, I was able to get scholarships and so forth, and that afforded the opportunity for me to really get what I feel is the best college experience living on the dorms. Not to say that as a commuter that you wouldn't get a great experience, but it really was different living on the campus and really going through this true college experience, yet still being very close to home in Brooklyn. So yeah, I went to Fordham University at Rose Hill. Go Rams.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Fordham University, I had worked at WFUV
Yes.
from the fall of 2000 all the way up until April of 2001. So I was taking care of the radio board operator
Wow.
as well as, taking care of the tapes, those digital tapes back then.
Yes.
You only have one
So
time.
I too worked at WFUV, so that means you may have known Bob Jewell in engineering. He was there a long time. And yeah, just to your point, everything was a little bit more tangible and touchable. So I remember reel to reel tape, and then that transition over to, and we had DATs, so which actually I think was really really great because I learned so much about radio and engineering. And then I went on. I worked there actually all 4 years in college, and in my senior year, I actually hosted Cityscape, which was the half hour news format programming for WFUV. Yeah.
Now, what was your major in
It
college?
was communication arts. So yeah, I definitely had the journalism and journalist bug at the time, and I always thought I'd go on to be a news reporter.
Now, who did you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, I would have to say my first thought is Oprah Winfrey. I remember her so well. When her show was on the air, and just all of the different interviews that she would do, her personality. She was very direct and focused, and it was just like really inspiring to see a black woman on the air in such a big role. So, interestingly enough, before Oprah, right? My glasses are red, and all of the glasses I've ever owned are red, and that started with Sally Jesse Raphael. Yeah, so I used to watch her show, Phil Donahue, all of the people who were on there. But it was something about Sally Jesse Raphael and Oprah for sure that they were huge influences on just seeing women in media, being able to ask the big questions, get the big asks. And dare I say, Barbara Walters was in there as well because she was also a powerhouse. And that's how I ended up actually going on at one point to work at ABC. And I was actually there when The View started. The very first episode of The View was being taped at West End Avenue and 66th Street. And I was working for ABC Radio. And the studio for The View was downstairs. So I was actually able to not directly, but be in the energy and spirit of when The View was born. Hmm.
Well, me growing up, we had those other talk shows. We had Mike
Hmm.
Douglas, that usually comes on CBS 2 at 4:30,
Hmm.
and every week he would have a co-host for the week. And yes, we had Merv Griffin, we had Johnny
Hmm.
Carson, we had Tom Snyder, and yes, in the 80s we had David Letterman and Arsenio
Hmm.
Hall, and then back in the 70s, Channel 9 WORTV
Hmm.
had Joe
Yeah.
Franklin every weekday
Hmm.
afternoon. And I grew up on one of those talk shows back then, especially late night. So when I'll be at my paternal grandmother's apartment in Harlem, only thing she'll be watching is Merv Griffin and Johnny Carson and Tom Snyder.
Hmm.
Those three. Now, speaking of that, growing up, what was some of your favorite radio
Oh,
stations?
wow. It's a blast from the past. I remember 107.5 WBLS. It was 98.7 KISS FM. And I also remember like tuning into like Hot 97. So I guess that was 97.1 was the frequency at the time. And again, that was like, I grew up in the time when it was a lot of the adult urban contemporary music that was coming onto the scene. And usually those were the three radio stations where you were going to hear it first in our communities. So definitely WBLS was usually number one, and then we went down the ranking, but all of them were in the mix at all times.
Yeah, well, same here. Me growing up, we had WWRL AM 1600. That's where Frankie Crocker started
Hmm.
his. And then by 72, he came over to 107.5, which was
Yeah.
WLIB AM and FM. And then they
To
changed it to
BLS. Yep.
WBLS. So there was still AM 1190 WLIB and sister station WBLS
Hmm.
FM. And one time when I was in the car with my late mother, we was on Lenox Avenue and we saw the Mutual Life Insurance building. And then I saw the call letters WLIB. I mean, they started there on Lenox Avenue before they moved down to 801 Second Avenue and then moved to 3 Park Avenue on the top floor. and now they are owned by MS, which also owns Hot 97 at 395
Hmm.
Hudson. And yes, Kiss FM was WOR 98.7. Because me growing up, we had CBS TV and
Hmm.
radio and records. Same thing with NBC, the parent company of RCA that makes TV. And then you had NBC radio and RCA records. Same thing with ABC.
Yeah.
They had TV and
Radio.
radio
Yep.
and records. And yes, and now today everything is all TV streaming and podcasting. But by the 80s, when Reagan and Bush were presidents, it was all sold to different corporate companies. It was the me decade. So like CBS was sold to Mr. Tisch,
Hmm.
and NBC was sold to GE, and ABC was sold to Capital Cities.
Yeah.
Records and radio were like either sold to different companies, and Metro Media, radio and television, when Mr. Murdoch,
Hmm.
owner of Fox, they have sold to, yeah, Channel 5. So when I came home from choir rehearsal, I said, what happened to Channel 5?
It's no longer.
WNEW TV is now WNYW?
Yeah.
Fox?
Yeah.
I was like, what happened
They all go
here?
through this metamorphosis somewhere, and sometimes we have to wonder what happened. I say the same thing, like, okay.
Hmm.
But yeah, when Rupert Murdoch came onto the scene, there were a lot of changes.
Yeah, so everything was like, nothing is the
It's never the
same.
same.
No, yeah. Now, being in the media, was that your calling?
I would definitely say yes. It's really interesting because after I graduated from Fordham, I ended up going over to ABC Radio Networks, and but I didn't work directly in media. I was in commercial services. So a lot of my career in media ended up being in commercial services, not direct reporting. But I had little dabbles and opportunities over time. So again, once I left college, once I graduated, I was at ABC Radio Networks, and then from there, that's how we met over at CBS, CBS Radio, and from there, when I left CBS, I actually went over to Time Warner, and again, I was in commercial services, dealing with the inventory, the same thing that I did at CBS. And then a little bit, a couple of pockets along the way, I had opportunities to do interviews and talk to people, man on the street, or be invited as a guest to interview other people, but never directly in news reporting, which is it is my passion, it is my calling. So, but I always find a way to it, even if it's not like the main, as we would say, 9 to 5 gig.
Now, who were your media influences, whether it's radio and television? Who were your influences that had inspired you?
Well, again, we're going to start with the queen herself, Oprah Winfrey, because again, a lot of people don't realize that she started out TV and radio before she went national. Also, to that, locally here in New York, reporters like Sue Simmons and Carol Jenkins and Gwen Ifill, who's from Queens, New York. All of these women, again, black women in media, it was not common. So, for someone like me who wanted to be in that sphere, talking to people, interviewing, learning, information sharing, these were the women, and there were many men, of course, as well. But again, as a black woman, I lean in on people who look like me, who talk like me, who come from the neighborhoods like me, and these were some of the women that did so. So yeah, they were very huge influences on how I approach people, how I ask questions, how I'm listening very carefully. That is a hard skill, and those women did it really well.
Me growing up, I had to watch the news. I had to sit, with my mom and her boyfriend at the time, and yeah, my maternal grandparents. So my late mother be watching ABC 7 Eyewitness
Eyewitness
News with
news.
Roger Grimsby, Bill Butel, plus Bruce King, Stormfield, and the Eyewitness News
Yep.
team. So the only difference was they had a diversity of news
Yeah.
reporters. everyone from the African American community to the Latino community to the Asian
Mm-hmm.
community, and yes, to the Native American and LGBTQ. Everyone had a
Yeah.
voice and representation that looks like
Mm-hmm.
us. So now you had the community that represents those communities. And yes, with CBS 2 News, we had Carol Martin and Vic Miles and JJ Gonzalez. And nationally, we had Russ Mitchell and Randall Pinkston, and also the late Harold Dow and Bill Whitaker.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, sports commentator James Brown and Irv Cross. And yes, we had Jane Kennedy, actress with no journalist experience. She was the first one to be on the NFL Today on
Mm-hmm. And
CBS.
just to cite
So,
one more person in radio, I don't know if you remember Vicki Allen. Yes, during
yes.
our time there, I mean, she was a great influence on me as well. I would make it a point to go and talk with her a lot, even though, there was Ernestine, Carol, and I we were in a back room somewhere doing commercial inventory. But I made it a point every day to go into the studio when Vicki was there, and her presence and her power was immense at that time as well. It still is, but especially during that time, it was really great to see yet again another black woman doing a 24-hour news broadcasting station, right? Um, Informing people of the news, all news, right, all the time. So yeah, shout out to Vicki Allen as well.
Yes. Now, you once worked at WCBS Newsradio 880 in the traffic department. How many years have you worked in the traffic department?
So for at CBS, again, I came from ABC. Before I was at CBS, I was at ABC. So at ABC, I was in traffic and continuity for 5 years. And interestingly enough, there was a person who used to work at ABC. His name was Frank Rayfield. And he ended up, I believe, becoming the director at News Radio 880. And I got a random phone call one day over at ABC. And he was like, "Hey, I want you to come over and interview for a job." I'm like, "Oh, I wasn't looking for one, but okay." And he wanted me to come over to commercial services and to the traffic department there. And when I came over, I ended up working with Ernestine. Why can't I call her last name right now? Help me out, Sam. Ernestine and Carol
Carol.
Daughtry. Ernestine Smith. Yep. It's been a minute. Um, and that was also really a great experience as well because again, most people don't know a lot or didn't know and maybe still don't understand a lot about traffic and continuity. And traffic is one of the most important areas that you can have in terms of ad sales after the salespeople, right? Because in traffic, we had to schedule all the commercials, make sure that you have the right commercials at the right time based on all the selling that the salespeople had done. And you want to make sure that everyone's getting paid, right? So ad sales is money. And if you don't do it right, nobody wants to give what's called a make good, which means free commercials, right? So that was where really the core of a lot of money flowed through. And here you had three black women scheduling it behind the scenes for News Radio 880 for a 24-hour format, 7 days a week. So it was a great experience.
Yes. Now, speaking of Carol and Ernestine, what was your experience working with Carol and Ernestine? Because before you came along, I've known Mr. Ed Geist, the late Ed Geist, and this other lady who was in the traffic department, and then another lady came along in the early 90s. Her name was Jessica Nicolette. I usually play around with her. I usually call her Jessica Fletcher Nicolette Sheridan back then. But what was it like working with those ladies that I just mentioned?
Yeah, so I didn't know Nicolette, but I did work with Ernestine and Carol, and again I thought it was actually really a great experience. The only thing I remember back then that was really interesting because at the time I don't know if people remember, people could smoke in these buildings. So I remember my going in my first day, and even before my first day, I remember them telling me, "Well, they smoke in that office. How you feel about like cigarette smoking in the office?" I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know. I'm a non-smoker, but this looks like this could be a really great experience and opportunity for me." So I said yes to the job, and when I met Ernestine and Carol, very sweet, very wonderful women, but I do remember the cigarette smoking as well, right? And I was like, oh no, how am I going to do this? Because the way the office was set up, it was like an office within an office. So you would walk in through a front door, and then to the right and left, there were two offices. Carol's office was on the right, Ernestine's office was on the left, and my desk was right in the middle. So they had doors that they could close, but you're inside of an office. So in terms of the compromise that we ended up making, they were able, CBS was, I remember Mel Karmazon actually approved it to say that they can buy like one of these industrial type air filters, and we would leave it running like all day and all night. So every time you walked into the office, you didn't know that people smoked in there, even though people were smoking. In terms of the work itself, it was a pleasure actually working with them, and I learned so much. Again, about how to schedule live copy, because in addition to pre-recorded commercial inventory, remember the anchors are on the air live. So there were some pieces of copy that they would have to read, whether it's a 30-second or 60-second spot promoting something. And part of my job was to sit and actually type up all of the live reads and then make sure we put it into the commercial book. And it was a really big, thick binder book of live reads, in addition to the commercial inventory. And you had to be detailed. And I learned from the best. Honestly, Carol and Ernestine, they were really good at their job, and they taught me so well. I learned so much about live reads and commercial inventory, and all of that happened at News Radio 880.
Now, what was some of your memories at CBS itself? Because I don't know if I told you that I've been at CBS for 35
Hmm.
years working at the Black Rock
Hmm.
headquarters. I've been there when Records was there, although Records was sold to Sony back in 1987. I didn't come on board until
Hmm.
1989. It was just all records and radio and TV. And then Records had moved out in November of '92, so their new home on Madison Avenue was where AT&T
Hmm.
used to be. So it was just all radio and TV, and then radio moved out in
Hmm.
2000 over to the broadcast center, and now a new home at 345 Hudson Street. So even though News Radio 880 went out of business,
Hmm.
but FM is still there, along with 1010 Winds and Fresh 102.7, which used to be
Hmm.
WNEW FM, Metro Media Radio. And when Murdoch took over Metro Media Television and left radio out,
Hmm.
so that means some of the radio stations were with other networks or other different corporate platforms. And I still keep in touch with Bill
Hmm.
Tynan, and told me everything that radio was sold to Intercom Communications, which is now Odyssey. And that's when he told me that they filed Chapter
Oh,
11 for bankruptcy.
yeah.
And this past summer, I was at a job fair at City College, and the same thing last year. I saw the Odyssey desk, and I was like, should I go to them? I said, nah,
Hmm.
I don't want to go to that company where they filed
Yeah.
bankruptcy. So I said, leave that alone,
Yeah.
and I'll just go on my own,
Yeah.
independent. So I have been with CBS for 35 years. My late maternal cousin, Ernest Bowles, had worked for CBS for 33 and a half
Hmm.
years when it was on 485 Madison
Hmm.
Avenue, when it was all TV, radio, and records was around the corner.
Hmm.
And then he moved to the broadcast center. So he was in charge of news, film, syndication. So you have all the messengers drop off all the news reels to him, and they would process it and drop it off to all of the news bureaus in London, Japan, and Beirut.
Hmm.
So he's been there ever since CBS was trying to get into a fight, when they created Viacom. It's dealing with
Yeah.
syndication. So when he was there when Viacom was introduced, so when CBS didn't give Viacom their props, Viacom said
Bye.
bye,
That's it. Peace out.
and then went on its own,
Hmm.
producing shows for other networks and for syndication. And then 1984, they created WLTW-FM, Light
Hmm.
FM, which was at 140 West 43rd Street before they moved to 1515 Broadway and took care of MTV and VH1 and
Hmm.
Nickelodeon. And that's been happening. Like I said earlier, corporate companies were buying up everything.
Yeah.
So my cousin Ernest was there when Mr. Tisch bought CBS.
Hmm.
News got hit the
Yeah.
most, but his job was saved. So there was another office down on 111 8th Avenue on the ninth floor in the Port Authority building. So he was there for data processing, the computer
Hmm.
data
Hmm.
processing thing. So he was there for a year and a half until he said, I
Yep.
quit.
Yep.
Why? Because data processing was not his
Hmm.
field.
Hmm.
And that's when we got into the computer
Oh, he
age.
got into a good field. Data, computers,
Yes.
all of it. Yeah. So he was still on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, I had to learn use the computers, which I'm no stranger to that. I'm
Hmm.
good at computers. It's just I had to learn how to do the
Yep.
emails. So in case if someone was expecting a package, then I will have to leave the message on their phone, but then my then supervisor says, make sure you email to them.
Hmm.
So in case if they're at a meeting, if they were expecting a package, make sure I email them as
Yep.
well. So that way they will know that your package is here, it's in the messenger center.
Hmm.
Let us know you want us to bring it up. If not, we'll hold it until you come back from the meeting.
Hmm.
So that was something that needed to be
Yep.
addressed. But like I said, I kept in touch with everyone, but not everyone, but I kept in touch with Bill
Hmm.
Tynan and also Bill
Hmm.
Daughtry
I remember
and
Carol's
also
husband. Yeah,
Stephen
Bill.
Reed.
I remember Bill. I remember he was
Yes,
working. He was in sports, sports broadcasting.
yes.
I remember Bill.
He was in sports before that, and after he left CBS, he went on to
Okay.
MSG,
Madison
Madison
Square Garden.
Square
Yep.
Garden Network,
Hmm.
and ESPN 98.7, and then he shifted gears to WBGO 89.9
Yeah.
FM. He was playing jazz,
Nice.
and also Darlene Parmalis, now married, Darlene Rodriguez. She went on to superstardom. She's the morning anchor woman for NBC4 Today in New
Mm-hmm.
York. And hopefully, I'll try to get in touch with Jessica Nicolette and Jean
Hmm.
Hodge. So, those are the other two I want to, say hi to
Yeah.
them, be a guest on my
Yeah,
show.
that would be
You
awesome.
know, everything's been
Yeah.
changing and ever since.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Now that WCBS Newsradio 880 is out of business, the same time I was laid off in 2024.
Right.
What is Angela Thompson doing now?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's a great question. So currently, what I am doing now is working for the federal government in the preparedness unit for the National Preparedness Division of FEMA. So my organization's in the news. Yeah, not in the best light, but FEMA is a really important agency throughout the government, and it is important to have these emergency management agencies because, as we know, a lot of emergencies happen, and you need people who are trained to come out and respond. In addition to, in my case, I get the benefit of going out into community and working in the preparedness unit. I am what they call a faith based specialist. So my job is to go out and talk to the houses of worship and faith based organizations and help them with things like putting together their emergency operations plan, planning for making a plan for the potential for any kind of emergency and how they would respond to it. or things like until help arrives, where we teach basic first aid, CPR, things like that, how to respond before 911 dispatchers get there, before your medical responders arrive on scene, especially in things like bleeding instances where you can't wait for someone to come. You have to do something in the interim before help arrives. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm currently working at FEMA, so it's an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, I'm just praying for you. Make sure they don't touch you and
Yeah,
everything,
fingers
because
crossed.
that's why that's why this episode here is so important. Because, as I said, as a former Viacom CBS Paramount employee, we get those tapes to you guys in the traffic department, and the same thing for TV. We get stuff from the Advertising Council every day. I call them the scary
Hmm.
people, known for Smokey the
Yep.
Bear, and also the United Negro College Fund and the American Red
Hmm.
Cross and the National Association to Prevent Child Abuse and also domestic
Yep.
abuse. And also, remember the Crying Indian, Keep America
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
And of course, the new project, Love Has No
Hmm.
Labels, where we're dealing with racism and the bullying and the pandemic
Hmm.
and the death of George Floyd, which sparkled the
Hmm.
Black Lives Matter movement. So,
Yeah.
as we get those things every day, when I remember back then, Top 40 radio, they would have the news updates at the top of the hour,
Hmm.
like 5 minutes before the top of the
Hmm.
hour or 5 minutes after the top of the hour.
Yeah.
In black radio, you don't get that much news and
Hmm.
information. So I remember growing up when 107.5 WBLS had signed a contract with Mutual Black Network News. This was back in 1973, 1974, coming out of Washington, D.C. They will have those news updates at 5 minutes before
Hmm.
the top of the
Hmm.
hour. And they would have those PSAs. Let me tell you, they scared the living daylights out of me. Especially that PSA when you hear
Yeah.
that and the baby starts
They were very
crying.
serious.
And you
Yeah.
hear the
Yeah.
you hear that voice of that lady. They're saying like, here's the baby
Hmm.
crying, no mother, no father,
Yeah.
some life. And then you hear the guy saying, now they're talking about
Hmm.
drugs. Don't fight the living
Yeah.
dead. And still up to this day, up to today, it scared me. I know I get nightmares, especially when that PSA for United Negro College
Yeah.
Fund with those
Yeah.
chains. I told mom, I said, please don't turn off the lights.
Oh,
I
you're really
get
affected
those
by them. Yeah.
nightmares from those
Yeah.
things. And especially those other ones, whether it's from the American Heart
Hmm.
Association or the American Cancer
Hmm.
Society or the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation. Those PSAs we get every single day. But the best part I like is when you have your favorite celebrities have those PSAs, and they'll put me to
Yeah.
sleep. So it's everything like that.
Understood.
Now, yeah. Now let's talk about the project that you founded and called Project NEAR. What does that word stands for?
Yeah, so NEAR is an acronym for Neighbors Engaged in Active Readiness. And what what my business is about is educating, right? Educating people, especially in our communities, about the importance of preparing for emergencies before, during, and after. Interestingly enough, at FEMA, that is the FEMA mission, right? Preparing for disasters before, during, and after, right? So that we can recover as quickly as possible. And but all of that starts with preparing. So for NEAR, there still is a void in our communities, right, in terms of education and awareness. Um, nine out of 10 times I'll usually ask people, well, in an emergency, let me ask you, Sam, in an emergency, right? What is your first thought about what you would do if an emergent situation arose? What would you do first?
Oh, glad you brought that up because every time when we have fire drills in our
Hmm.
building, when you hear that signal, got to get everybody out of their rooms, out of their offices, and make sure you get to the nearby box. And you have to pull that box. So in case there's a fire, you got to go upstairs. Don't use the elevator. And that's the same thing what happened with 9/11 in 2001 when we heard on the news that the first building got attacked. The first plane hit the first building. That was around 8:48. And then 20 minutes later, the second plane hit the second
Yeah.
building. So we were all locking up everything. So we had to bunk down and we had the radio on all day. And like around 3 o'clock, that's the time we left. So I see that the smoke had cleared. I was trying to get the express bus to go home to the
Yeah.
Bronx, and then I heard that the express bus wasn't running. I said, "Oh man, I gotta take the subway home."
And think about it. Did you, in all of that planning, as you were talking about it, you didn't really know probably where to go or what to do. You're thinking about getting home, but then your route to get home is not available, right?
Yeah, because you always have to have a backup plan. I'll give you an example. When we had that blackout in
I remember
2001,
that.
and this was on the third Thursday of August. It's the day before I was getting ready to go to Virginia to funeralize my maternal great uncle. This was happening at 4:05
Absolutely.
p.m. We heard that everything went
Everything
out.
went out. Yeah.
Boom. Lights went out. We had that little box thing. We had that big lights was on. We had to evacuate the building, and I was walking all the way down to 23rd Street. I was walking on 6th Avenue. I kept on walking all the way down to the end of 23rd Street on the east side of Madison Avenue. There were some express buses, but let me tell you, there was a lot of express buses. It was like
Yeah. It was
packed.
chaos.
I mean, super
Yeah,
packed.
we were not working far from
So,
one another because at that time I was at Time Warner, and that was on 19th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue, one of the annex buildings, right? And the same thing, to your point, I remember the time too. It was 4:05. You're absolutely right, because we were all sitting. I was in traffic and continuity, and all of a sudden we're getting reports of there's no power. And nobody knew. We just figured, it's just a regular power outage. And then I immediately called into folks at CBS because remember, I had come from CBS. I was like, what's going on? And I remember them saying, oh, multiple states are out. They have no power. And immediately for me, I was like, oh no, this is another terrorist attack, maybe. The minute you start hearing many states with no power, and we had just gone through September 11th, not too long, 2 years before. And it's just like, what's happening. So similar to you, I ended up there was no plan on the site. They told us to stay on site, but a lot of people were making choices whether to leave, whether to stay. They didn't really quite know what to do at work. There was no plan on if something like this happens, should we keep people in place? Are we doing a roll call? That kind of thing. And just like you, started walking and ended up walking all the way over to the Brooklyn Bridge. And then we couldn't walk over the Brooklyn Bridge for some reason and ended up walking to the Manhattan Bridge. And I remember that because at the time, most people, you don't walk over the Manhattan Bridge, you walk over the Brooklyn Bridge. And when we got to the other end, Marty Markowitz, our borough coordinator, our borough president, correction, Marty Markowitz was on the other end of the bridge telling us all, welcome back to Brooklyn. And he was handing out bottled water. So to your point, I remember a lot of people didn't know what to do. People just started migrating back, trying to get home. And because I remember the power was out that whole night, it did not come back until the next day, around midday, I believe. And it was one of those times that experience, in addition to things like September 11th and all of these smaller things along the way, always resonated with me in terms of stay safe, stay aware. What can we do to help each other, right? So that's how near. This is kind of like the culmination of all these years of experiences of saying we're still not prepared. And education information is not a far away thing. It's very close to us. I actually did adult education teaching to English language learners, and I worked at the library system, the New York Public Library System as well. education's right at our fingertips, right? But sometimes it's a little bit hard for people to say, hey, I'm going to come and actively learn about something. So for me, with starting something like Near, again, I want our neighbors to be engaged, and active and ready. So that's where starting of this was born.
You know, me growing up, I lived through all of those events. I lived through the first blackout in 1977 in July. I was living on 1545 Rylander Avenue. I was going to day camp, and we heard that Wednesday night blackout came. So nothing was on. We had the radio on, battery operated, and I couldn't go to day camp the next day. There was no school buses running or anything like that. And same thing when we get to 1991, when the beating of Rodney King, which the next day 4 LA cops were found not guilty, and then had the
Right.
riots in Los
Yeah.
Angeles. And then on that Friday, there was some kids that were getting out early. I don't know if they were starting the protest or not, but we left a little early around 3 o'clock on that Friday. Then that's when we heard the news from Rodney King. So it's saying, can we just all get along? And that was the first thing, that everything should be back to normal. As I said, I lived through those news events, the blackout, the beating of Rodney King, and Y2K, and 9/11, and the first attack on the World Trade Center
Yep.
before
It was
the
1993.
buildings came,
Remember
yeah,
that?
came tumbling
Yeah.
down. I have, and now we're in the 20th anniversary of Hurricane
Yeah.
Katrina in New Orleans,
Yeah.
Louisiana. I want to give a special shout out to my girl, Kathy Constant, and she has relatives in New Orleans, and yes, her relatives and from Haiti, and she's originally from Haiti, and yes, her friend, her co-worker Winnie Antonor is from New Orleans as well. And when you see those pictures of houses that water was up to here,
Absolutely.
up almost to the roof, especially in our black community, got hit the worst.
Absolutely. Our
So,
communities tend to get hit the worst always in any disaster. And that's for multiple reasons, right? Usually, first, we're not as prepared because we didn't have the tools or the resources or the knowledge to prepare in advance for certain things, especially things like flooding, right? I think it was Hurricane Ida that taught us about those that live in
yes.
basements, right? That was one of the lessons learned. Those that live in basements and you have this rapid water that comes from extreme weather, to immediately evacuate. And that came out of that hurricane. The tragedy of people unfortunately dying in their apartments because they were not aware of the dangers of basement flooding and how fast water can build where you cannot exit, and water moves very quickly. So sometimes people think about like when you're out in the ocean and you get caught by a riptide. It's very powerful. Sometimes you can't get out of it. Same thing if you're in a space where water is rapidly rushing in, you may not have that opportunity to get out. Hurricane Katrina is another example of that. So, yeah, all of these events really shaped me, and especially in our neighborhoods. I grew up in East Flatbush, which is now known as Little Haiti, and it's really still interesting just how much we don't know how to stay safe, and it's not difficult, but it has to be active participation and people like me who actively want to come in to our communities and educate because I grew up at a time, and I'm sure you did too, when we had knowledge is power, right? And I was part of like the reading is fundamental program. It is important, and the knowledge is out there, and I want to make sure that we stay safe in our communities because the more resilient we are, the safer that we'll be.
Yes, indeed. Now, I've seen your accolades while I was reading your bio. You participated in the CERT program and awards you've gotten from the White House. What's it like getting those awards and other accolades?
Well, it's always an honor to be recognized for your work, but especially even more so when it's your volunteer work. I've been an active volunteer my entire life, so I never expect to be rewarded for it. It's just my purpose in life. It's my calling to help my fellow neighbor, community. That's the spirit and energy that's within me. So it felt really, really amazing to, get a call to say, hey, we want to give you an award. And me and many other people who volunteered for the CERT program. And for people who are not familiar with the CERT program, CERT actually it's the Community Emergency Response Team. And this was a group that was created in Los Angeles in 1985. And the program was created to provide civilian volunteers with disaster response training to assist in communities during emergencies. So here in New York City, in the five boroughs, it is usually run through the Office of Emergency Management. And you get training. It's a 10-week free training if you opt in to do it, to learn everything from light search and rescue, basic first aid and CPR, disaster response, and if needed, if there is a disaster and they need extra hands, you have specialized training to help in your neighborhoods, right? So each year, for those who put in anywhere from 100 hours or more volunteering in your own community, the White House bestows these awards onto us as volunteers. So for me, I have been blessed to have received 2 gold awards and a bronze. So gold awards come when you devote or dedicate 500 hours a year in volunteerism in your communities. So it is always an honor to be recognized. Not that I expected or look for it, but it's always an honor. And it makes me feel proud to know that I'm contributing to my communities always.
Now, how many seminars have you done so far in the minority community?
Yeah, so this is a multi-part question here because as a CERT volunteer, I've done many. Many, many, many. So my zones were always like East Flatbush, any place where we have brown skin, melanin, I'm there. Because again, even with something like the CERT program, which interestingly enough, it is a FEMA program. After it started out in California in 1985, but over time it developed into a nationwide program, which fell under the FEMA banner. So. In terms of under NEAR, I'm new. I just started my organization, so my goal is to reach as many people as possible. So I'm targeting and hoping to be able to cover at least 20 before the end of the year, 20 groups. And usually my goal is 50 plus people. And hopefully I'll be at the New Rochelle Public Library in November. Doing some preparedness education and stop the bleed.
Okay. Now, as I said earlier, we're both Viacom CBS Paramount employees that we have worked in the media, in entertainment, for news, sports, and entertainment, and special reports or breaking news. So, as I mentioned, all the news events that I had lived through from being in the Bronx for 55 years, going to Manhattan and leaving from Manhattan and all around those East Coast and down south. So I always making sure that I get to my destination safely. As we right now, as we speak, we are traveling through these dangerous states.
Absolutely.
And just had my COVID vaccine in 2021. I had been exposed to COVID, but I wasn't rushed to the hospital. And
Thank goodness, yeah.
one of my church members had passed away, coming from a funeral in 2020, and she was the first person to die from COVID. So you never know what's going to be taking place, but you gotta have something prepared.
Absolutely.
You just can't sit and wait till the last minute.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you this question: why is emergency preparedness in the minority community so important?
Oh, that's a great question. It is very important. As you just mentioned, it's important to have a plan for anything. Think about how many plans we make in general in life, right? People plan on where they're going to have their birthday party. They plan on where they want to live, where they want to go on vacation. Why not have a plan on how to stay safe in case a disaster or an emergency happens or a hazard, right? A hazard is basically a danger, something that's in danger where now you need to protect life and assets, right? In our communities, again, like so many other communities, but especially in ours, we think of emergencies as the big fire, right? Which it is an emergency. But we don't think about other things that are dangerous to us, right? So I feel that in black communities, we're also conditioned when we can to call 911, right? Just like everybody else, if there's a problem, call 911 and somebody will come. However, there are certain things that happen where you can't wait for 911. You're going to call, but again, if it's a bleeding instance, you're not going to wait 10 minutes. Or the average response time from 911 in the five boroughs is about 8 minutes. And depending on if you're in Manhattan, God only knows sometimes, because depending on where you are and where that call comes in, it could take a little longer, maybe. But I say all this to say, think about that. In 8 minutes, it takes less than 5 minutes for somebody to lose half of their blood volume in a traumatic experience. Maybe you get hit by a car or something really big. You don't have 8 minutes to wait. You will have to do something. So why not be empowered to have the knowledge and the tools to learn how to save a life, how to use a tourniquet, right? Something that takes 5 minutes to learn, but you can save a life or many lives if you are the only one who may know what to do, right? But in our communities, again, also, I dare to say that sometimes emergency management officers are not looking for us. We're not included at the table. There are many challenges in emergency management and planning, and oftentimes, some of the conditions and things that are happening in our communities are not taken into account. Even just making the connection and building the relationships in our communities. Usually, when we see emergency responders, they're coming in after the fact. Something has happened. But why not be there before? Now, for me, I happen to be in an area where I come in before something happens. And making those relationships and connections with faith-based leaders or the city council or the mayor. In this case, I live in New Rochelle now. I still am forever Brooklyn. But I also know all of the players here in New Rochelle, in Westchester, from the mayor to the city council people to my neighbors. And again, I'm constantly discussing prepare, and how to do it. Because it's one thing to tell people how to do it. It's not my job to just tell you do it and then you go out and do it. I'm here to educate and to reinforce and empower people to take action, right? And then continuous learning. So in our communities, there are many gaps, and it's some of it is lack of resources, and then a lack of having us at the table to say, hey, we don't have these resources to be able to connect, to learn what's happening out there. Or even something as simple as you talked earlier about having, we all have a cell phone, we would think, but not everybody has a cell phone. Or not everybody will use a cell phone. In my neighborhood, East Flatbush, it's an older population, aging community, right? And half the people, somewhere upwards of 70%, do not have a cell phone. So the communication method is still old school, pen and paper. You go to church, or you're going to hear it word of mouth. So, for me, it's very important to make sure that in our communities that we have trusted sources that come from our communities that are able to get messaging out properly, so that we can all work together to make sure that we are resilient and that we're prepared for any kind of disaster. And in preparing, it takes away the anxiety of when we're going through a disaster, right? Because certain things are in place, as opposed to we don't know what to do and trying to figure it out in the middle of a mess. That's not the best approach.
Now, here's a question I gotta ask you. Have you ever thought about having your own radio station? And if so, what would it be like?
Oh, yeah, I would love to do that. Exactly what you're doing, you inspire me. I would love to just start a podcast in and of itself. Or, dare I say, I had aspirations being inspired by Oprah to get to her level, right? So you never know. Like I said, a lot of people who went on to do many great things started over the age of 40. So I'm only forever 21, but I like to channel my 40 plus population and say, you just never know. Who knows where near or anything else that I develop will grow. But yes, I've always wanted to rise to the level of an Oprah and all of those great people who have developed, multimedia entities, right?
Now, here's a question I always ask my guests: living or dead, which black or Latino news reporter you wish you wanted to meet?
Oh, living or dead. I think I would say Gwen Ifill. She passed away a couple of years ago. I always wanted to meet her. Never got the opportunity. I There was something about her interview style, her presence, her no nonsense approach. That she was not flustered when challenged with her direct line of questioning from very powerful and influential people. And again, I watched PBS a lot, so she's a person I really would have loved to have met and just learn what goes through her mind, like a day in the life of Gwen Ifill. Um, so yeah, I would have to say Gwen Ifill.
Yes. Now, here's something I wanted to share with you. This was back in October 2006, before I went on my birthday vacation. We were celebrating my pastor's 40th anniversary celebration, or 40th anniversary celebration. And it was up at the Davenport Club in New Rochelle, New York. It was me and Mom, and we saw a glimpse of Bill McCreary. I said, "Hey, Mom, look, there's Bill McCreary." And she said, Bill McCreary. And we would wish we would have went over him and say, "Hi, Mr. McCreary, how are you? It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. McCreary. Thank you for reporting the news and telling the truth and giving us information that affects the black
Yeah.
community."
Yeah.
So, like I said, we watch black news every Saturday night on Fox Channel 5, 10:30, right after the 10 o'clock weekend news, just giving us news and information that affects the black community and always giving us some entertainment
Yeah.
reports and
For that, I
everything.
would.
So I always want to say,
Yeah, for that I would also add,
yes.
like you said, you mentioned it earlier, like it is with Gil Noble. I remember my dad and I used to watch that all the time. Yeah, all of these great influences, especially again, black people in our communities talking to us, making sure that we do have the truth, and there was no sugarcoating it, right? We weren't going to get the fluff. So, to your point, I appreciated that.
Now, here on the Black Soul Music Experience podcast, I always ask my guests who are the best top 10 musicians of all
Oh,
time. But since this is a special episode where we are doing a little educational episode, so I'm going to be doing my Black Soul Music Experience message songs of all
okay.
time. Now, I have my top 5 songs. Normally, I always ask my previous guests, we do like a top 10 countdown, like the show America's Top 10, hosted by Casey
Mm-hmm.
Kasem. So I would put down what was the best songs that had the best radio airplay, and what was the best songs that had the number one
Mm-hmm.
hits of all
Mm-hmm.
time. That song received a gold or a
Mm-hmm.
platinum or double platinum. That single that sold over 1 million copies in print, and that artist performed that song on American Bandstand or the Midnight
Mm-hmm.
Special or Soul Train or NBC's Saturday Night Live or Solid
Oh, I
Gold,
remember Solid
or
Gold.
that they had Did they had that music video premiered on MTV and VH1 and BET and all the other music shows on there? Or did they the perform that they had that special on CBS or NBC or ABC? Or did they have that special on PBS, whether it's on Great Performances or they had their own special during Pledge Month? Or did they have that live concert special on HBO or Showtime? So I'm going to start with my 5 top 10 songs. I should say top
Okay.
5. I should say these are the top ones. Now, number 5, I start off with The Night the Lights Went Out, performed by the Tramps. Now, this song was released back on Veterans Day 1977. As I mentioned, I lived through the blackout in July of 1977. And I said to myself, what would a song like that would turn out to be a hit based on what took place in July of 1977? And that song was from the LP The Tramps 3 on the Atlantic label. I heard that song on WBLS on Veterans Day 1977. I said to myself, how would they come up with a song like that based on that headline? So I put The Night the Lights Went Out, performed by the Tramps, at number 5. Number 4, Sign of the
Oh,
Times, performed by
Prince. Oh my
Prince.
God. That's my
And
favorite there,
he
Prince.
he written everything, what was happening in the black community,
Yep.
whether it's from drug addiction or the mass
Mm-hmm.
shootings or problems with domestic abuse or problems in the black community, like we're talking about right now, emergency preparation. So I put Prince's song Sign of the Times at number 4. Number 3, Message in the Music, performed by the OJs. That was released back in the summer of 1976 from their LP, Message in the Music. And this was a concept album. And as I said, Kenneth Gamble and Leon Hupp, they founded Philadelphia International Records. Their slogan, there's a message in our music, there's a message in our song. So get your information from the sounds of communication. And that's what we're talking about in this episode. How to get information from the sounds of communication, not disinformation or miscommunication that you see on the other side of the media, which wanted to give us information that is not
Yeah.
true. When you see someone tweeting, and it's like saying, you can't be tweeting like that. Your job is to lead, not sit and tweet. So when something happens, you got to be prepared for those things. So I put
Absolutely.
Message in the Music from the OJs at number 3. Number 2, This Air I Breathe, also from the OJs. And that was from the LP Ship Ahoy. This was a concept album that's dealing with history and social awareness. So I put down This Air I Breathe. This is dealing with climate change. So when you hear the slogan, This air I breathe, it don't belong to me. I suck it in and I suck it out. Then you have the problem why we're sucking in with all this pollutants in the air. Like I said earlier with the PSA from Keep America Beautiful with the crying Indian,
Yeah.
going looking at those factories, you see all the pollutants coming out of the building, why we are sucking it in, which may cause some other diseases. So that was something I put down. So I put This Air I Breathe by the OJs at number 2. Number 1, Mercy, Mercy Me, The Ecology by the late Marvin
Yeah.
Gaye from his What's Going On LP. This was a concept album. This album was released back in 1971, and this was his follow-up to his other song, What's Going On. Mercy, Mercy Me had dealt with the ecology, the environment, climate change. We see what was happening in our world, in our pollutants, why we are polluting the air. So we always blame God, that God didn't do this, we did. We're the ones who are polluting the air and throwing garbage someplace which causes some other things. And yes, emergency, we are not prepared for these things. So in case if something happens with other things and all around us, and we don't take care of our part or anything very seriously. So I put Mercy, Mercy Me, the ecology by the late Marvin Gaye at
Oh,
number
good stuff.
one. So those are my top five message songs.
That's pretty awesome. As you were talking about, your last song selection, I was starting to think about, like you said, we in part we're talking about emergencies and planning. What a lot of people don't realize is that we talk a lot about, okay, maybe planning a little bit, but then response. Something happened, and then everybody's responding. What a lot of people don't realize too is that a disaster, depending on what's happening, how big it is, it goes on for years and years. We talked about Hurricane Katrina, right? 20 years later, and you still have garbage and debris fields from 20 years ago. And I just recently did a training on debris management, right? Because, something that most people don't think about. Let's say you have a lot of flooding or hurricane. House, wood pieces come off the house, bricks, cars were floating down the street, boats, everything. All of it has to end up someplace after when as they start cleaning up the streets. It usually ends up, in a designated spot that's hopefully away from neighborhoods and residences if it can be. But what a lot of people don't realize is all of that debris will sit for a minimum of 10 years. 10 years. Okay. And we see this in New Orleans, right? So in terms of all of the musical icons, I bring this back to, some of the words of inspiration from many in the musical industry with the messages of hope and peace, but also of planning and being resilient and thinking ahead. These are the things that I think about, especially when it comes to our safety in Black communities, right? Because again, there is not, in my opinion, as high of an emphasis, depending on where you go state to state. It starts usually at the Office of Emergency Management, your local OEM, and then it builds out from there. But again, if you don't necessarily have a seat at the table, people won't know what's affecting you in your neighborhood. And then when you do get affected, how can you recover if you didn't know what was available before something happens, right? So, and like I said, music is very motivational and inspirational in terms of getting messaging out about pretty much everything on what we need to do in life, and how to succeed and be empowered to stay connected. And that in part goes back to how I came up with the name Near, right? We all are connected on this planet, I believe. Even if we don't know one another, we are all human beings and we are all connected. And when something is not right in that connection, problems occur. So why not stay near? Why not stay close? And why not help one another? None of us are staying here long term. And so why not maximize on the time? I was listening to a song, and forgive me because I don't remember what the song was, but one of the lines was, "We have about 75 summers and 75 winters." And when you put things in that context, that's not a long time. That's not many summers and many winters. So make the best of this life and live your life. And I really wish I could remember the song right now. I'll have to circle back to on that one. But just thinking about it in that context, and again, from a song, I'm like, you know what? You're right. That's not a long time. We feel like we'll be here forever. But really, on average, maybe we only have 75 winters and 75 summers. Live your life. And why not help each other along the way?
Right. It really is. Well, Angela, thank you so much for being here on the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And the last time we bumped into each other, you came to my birthday party in
Yeah.
2010 at the Youth
Oh my God,
Congress.
it was
So
like
very
15 years
nice.
ago. Has it been that long?
Yes. Uh-huh. So it's always that I keep in touch with some of my CBS folks, who have been good to me, delivering packages in radio and television and records. and everywhere around the Black Rock headquarters building. And I dedicate this episode in memory of my cousin, Ernest Bowles. And he was the first black to be hired at CBS. Had it not been for my maternal cousin, Ernest, you wouldn't see Carol Martin or Vic Miles or J.J. Gonzalez or Randall Pinkston or Gayle King. You wouldn't see Bill McCrary, or you wouldn't see Sue Simmons or Carol
That's right.
Jenkins or Bob
Yeah.
T or Darlene Rodriguez. You wouldn't see Gil Noble or Melba Taliver or Heidi
Yeah.
Chung or Connie Chung
Exactly.
or Liz Cho. And you wouldn't see all of our weather folks, including Spencer Christian and Al Roker,
Absolutely.
just to name a few. So this episode goes out to him. And it wouldn't be us, people of color, who once worked at CBS. So former employee to former employee. Thank you for taking the time out to be with me on the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Not only we entertained, but we also educated to be informed.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, and very happy to see you and connect always. So thank you. Good finds good. So thank you.
Yes. Now, before we go, where can we follow you on social media, and give us a quick plug on everything
Yeah.
that our community needs?
Yeah. So I'll start with from the federal side, right? So right now, again, it's National Preparedness Month. So people can go to ready.gov/September. And you'll see everything about readiness preparedness, tips, tools, tricks, how to put together a go bag, and so forth. I always encourage people on in their towns, communities, sign up for your local Office of Emergency Management alerts. So that's as simple as doing a Google search and saying, where is the Office of Emergency Management in my neighborhood? If you're in the 5 boroughs, obviously it's New York City Emergency Management, NYSEM. But for those who are not in the 5 boroughs, for Westchester, it's the Westchester OEM. In New Jersey, it's New Jersey OEM, all .gov. But I would always tell people just Google that. For my endeavor, for NEAR Prepared, people can visit my site to learn how they can get more education resources and have me come out, maybe do a presentation or a workshop. So they can go to nearprepared.com. I'm also on Instagram, and I just started rolling out Preparedness Month tips and tricks and so forth. So there's a lot that's going to be happening on Instagram. So on Instagram, it's Near Prepared. And that's where you'll find me posting stories and sharing more knowledge and information on some of the things that you should think about on staying prepared, and also how to respond and recover should a disaster strike.
Okay, well, thank you for the update. Download all of those top 5 message songs from your favorite artists that we just talked about on this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Visit iTunes.com, Spotify.com, or purchase a CD at Amazon.com. Make sure you support my friend and colleague, Miss Angela Thompson. Look for her on Instagram /NearPrepared, also nearprepared.com, and you can also OEM.gov. And as always, ready.gov/September. Make sure you check out those websites. Where can you find for the nearest information on how can you be prepared in times like these? And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to check out this episode, please subscribe by going to the link. The link is riverside.fm/studio/Samuel-Wilson Jr.'s. Don't forget to add the S at the end, -studio. And yes, I will be posting this episode on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you have a hard time getting on to riverside.fm, then please become a member and subscribe to patreon.com/the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Log on to Patreon, go to the homepage, be sure to use your email and your password, where you can find all of the shows done by different creators And make sure you go to the top and type in the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Check out all of my audio podcast episodes and my video podcast episode clips that you may have missed. And if you have a hard time getting on to Patreon, then make sure you look for this episode. I will be posting this episode on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. All you need to do is go to the YouTube homepage and type in the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. If you like this episode, if you love this podcast, please subscribe, please support, please give me a thumbs up, please leave a comment, and please pass it on. Thank you for joining me as I close out this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience.
Well, that's about it for this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. I'm Sam Wilson Jr. Thank you for joining me, and please tune in next week for an all-new episode. The Black Soul Music Experience Podcast is sponsored by the support of listeners and viewers like you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe by going to riverside.fm/studio/Samuel-Wilson Jr.'s-studio. And don't forget to check out my audio and video podcast episodes by becoming a member and subscribe to patreon.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. And also check out my video podcast episodes by subscribing to youtube.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. And please leave your comments, feedbacks, and replies by going to my Facebook homepage. Visit facebook.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. You can also tweet me on X, aka Twitter, at Sam Wilson Jr. 66. As always, partying, remember this: reach for the top and your dreams will come true, and it can happen to you. From all of us, take care. God bless. Thanks for listening. Have a good week, and please be safe.